The day it all began. There was sunlight on the pool and a kid aiming a gun like it was a toy. And I still remember the way my heart dropped, not because of the noise, but because in that instant I realized how fragile the small, careful life I'd built really was. My name is Eli Mercer. I'm a deputy, used to finding order where there's chaos. And I moved myself and my daughter to Emerson Park because we wanted quiet. A yard big enough for her to draw in the dirt. A mailbox that still smelled like mail on Saturday mornings, ordinary things. What I didn't bargain for was how easily ordinary people can get used to being ruled. And what some folks will do to keep that rule. We'd been there 6 months. The house was one of those stories on the outskirts places with porches. A faded mailbox. One of those community pools that always smelled faintly of chlorine and teenage sunblock. My daughter, Maya, was 16 then, with a laugh that could still make me forget the nights when sleep felt like a foreign country. She loved the pool more than anything, not for the swimming so much as the way she'd sit on the coping with her legs dangling. Sketchbook on her knees, drawing tiny cities no one would ever visit. That afternoon she'd invited a kid from school over. I remember we traded glances, the kind that say be safe, without dialing back the permission, and I took the back gate to get the lawnmower. If I had stayed inside to fold laundry, we'd have had a different kind of memory. I wandered back across the yard and saw them, a shirtless teenage boy on the concrete, the thing in his hand catching the sun. My first instinct was professional move. Assess. De-escalate. The second was father, get between that boy and my kid. Then the third took over. The quiet, slow kind of getting real that comes after years on the job. The boy's face didn't look like he was about to apologize. It looked like he wanted to be feared. He's got a gun, Maya said. The word small, like a dare to believe them. I don't think she realized how calm she sounded. Calm is a weird thing. Sometimes it's strength. Sometimes shock. I stepped forward. The boy Cole Hale turned toward me like he had been expecting a show. He was the image of entitlement, hair too perfect, jaw tight. The kind of kid who'd been told he was the center of the world since before he could ride a bike without training wheels. You don't want to do that here, I said. That was as much a warning as a practice in diplomacy. He smiled. Not the friendly kind. Make me. I don't remember my hand moving. I remember the sound the gun made when it went clattering across the tiles, not the boom you hear in a movie, but the dull, intimate click that a real firearm makes when it's knocked from someone's grip. I remember kneeling, grabbing his wrist, twisting boring police stuff. Muscle memory. I remember the pool's reflection like broken glass across his face. I remember a neighbor standing at the fence, phone in hand, already recording. Within minutes, there were sirens somewhere down the street. Within hours, there would be statements, spinning, and a community splitting in ways you don't see until something snaps. The Hale family were the kind that raised curtains to watch who came to their gate. Veronica Hale, the HOA president, wore color-coordinated cardigans and smiled like she was apologizing for the weather. She had a way of saying, we all have to follow the rules, that made the rules feel like moral law rather than a set of bylaws voted on by people who could be voted out. Cole's father ran a small contracting business. People in the neighborhood whispered he'd been bending bids and friends' invoices for years. No one had put it together. Not yet. By morning, the incident had a dozen versions. Veronica called it an unfortunate misunderstanding. Maybe the boy had meant to scare some kids. She told the reporter who called. But it wasn't protection of a position she had to hold. The HOA released a community statement that said the privacy and safety of residents were our top priorities. My name came up in one version as an overzealous deputy making a mountain out of a molehill. I printed the surveillance footage from our doorbell camera and posted it online. I wanted the truth to sit where people could see it. Sometimes light is the only cure. That uploaded video was the moment the neighborhood stopped pretending Emerson Park was simply quaint and started acting like a small town with a secret ledger. It let people see the gun, the way the teen moved, the way I kept my hands on him until he calmed. It didn't show, though, the way the HOA board meetings had always felt like performances staged by people who liked their power uniformed in clipboards and nameplates. It didn't show the invoices that seemed to appear out of nowhere for landscaping that had never been done. The security upgrades that went to a company with a P.O. box and a friend's name attached. The way fines were whispered and then printed and then used like a lever. Once you upload a thing, once you press the button and it lives outside the house and your voice has an echo, people start to listen. Some cheered. Others tooted and said things about stirring up trouble. That's the other hazard of these conflicts. For every person who wants truth, there's someone else who values the illusion that keeps their comfortable life intact. Then the retaliations started small, a violation notice, left on our porch for an overgrown planter that had never existed. A lock on the pool gate keyed to a code the HOA refused to give us. They cut our access to community spaces claiming safety protocols. Paperwork arrived like rain. Each envelope had the brand of bureaucratic certainty. Each letter read like cold calculus. Non-compliance. It said. Penalty assessed. I'd spent half my life in systems where procedures were supposed to protect people. Here, procedure became a weapon. It was clear that if this was going to be settled by truth, it would require more than truth on a screen. It would require proof in paper, in ledgers, in how money had moved through a small community like a rumor. I knocked on doors. Some people told me to leave things alone. This is our board, they said. Others, like Sandra Kim, the neighborhood treasurer, handed me a folder with invoices that smelled faintly of tobacco and old coffee. I didn't sign off on half of this, she said. I soft around the edges. She'd been the kind of woman who liked order until she realized order was covering up something else. We began to piece things together. Contracts flagged at odd amounts. Vendors that only existed on paper. A landscaping invoice that matched. Line item for line item. To a company owned by a man who'd once been on the board. There were patterns you could feel like a low-hum money going out. Not for services, but to keep influence insulated. The more we found, the angrier people got. There's a particular kind of righteous anger that, if you let it, will break you. I tried to keep it useful. The HOA pushed back in ways that felt surgical. Notices multiplied. A neighbor received a fine for unauthorized exterior alteration when her porch light bulb went out. Another had a complaint filed about unsupervised pets. The message wasn't subtle. Cross the line, and we'll make your life expensive. The board sent a lawyer a letter demanding I remove the footage or face a defamation suit. Defamation in small-town America is just another way of saying, we'll make this cost you enough that you'll regret speaking up. But removing the footage would have been like erasing the broken glass from the boy's face. I wouldn't do it. The kids at school started to whisper. Maya grew quieter. Pulled in. Like paper curling at the edges. I'd catch her in the kitchen. Hands wrapped around a mug too hot for her palms. Staring at the steam like it was a map. I mentioned it once. Gently. How she seemed off. How cooking dinner felt like an intrusion into territory I couldn't protect her from. And she said, Dad, I'm fine. With a firmness that both soothed and scared me. I'm tired of your acting like the whole world is a crime scene. She said. Half joke. Half plea. She wanted to be a kid who could play cards at the pool. Who could draw seaside cities without thinking about politics. But the retaliation escalated. The Hales held a meeting and produced a petition. Suddenly, there were accusations that I had intimidated residents. That my actions had put the community at risk. That the video had been selectively edited. When you're in law enforcement, you learn that narratives are as dangerous as weapons. Folks will assemble a story and, if it fits their map, they'll believe it. The HOA's narrative was a crafted thing. They suggested that I'd overreacted. That Cole was provoked. That the community needed to be protected from outsiders who sought to destabilize it. Then the anonymous envelope came. It was a key thumbed into paper and a USB tucked inside. No return address. I thought about ignoring it. About the way things like that can be booby traps for your life. But the voice in me that believes in proof more than pledges opened it. The footage was a set of night cam videos and a handful of maintenance logs. One clip showed Cole's dad. At 3 a.m. Shredding what looked like invoices, or trying to. Another showed a truck pulling up late at night. Dumping landscaping waste and leaving a receipt from a supplier with a name that matched one on the HOA ledger. That was the kind of thing you can't easily spin away with a statement and a cardigan. We took the files to the county. There's a certain bureaucracy to righteous action forms to fill. People to convince. But we had records now. And when you hand a ledger to an auditor, they stop smiling and start calculating. An audit began. The county issued subpoenas. For a while I had to maneuver in a strange in-between space, public servant, private citizen, father, You learn new kinds of patience in those stretches, the kind that lets a trial build slowly like pressure under a lid. Veronica Hale's face at the first public hearing was practiced calm. She wore pearls and said, into the microphone, "Our community deserves security and civility." The crowd, a mix of old friends and people who'd come to watch a spectacle, clapped politely. Then a prosecutor played a clip, Cole's voice. Taunting. The clear lift of entitlement. The gun clatter caught on our doorbell. Then another clip, a shredded invoice. Reassembled by the county. Then a timeline of payments moving from the HOA to a shell company that matched the name on a subcontractor's receipt. The veneer of civility cracked. When it did, the sound in the room felt like a release you don't expect. People who had been nodding politely now murmured with recognition. A neighbor who'd once said, "Let's not air the neighborhood's dirty laundry," stood up and read aloud an account of a time she'd been fined for painting her door the wrong color, while the board subsidized a dozen projects for friends. It hit people in the place it matters, their sense of fairness. That's where the real story lives. Not in legal filings, but in the small, everyday ways folks measure justice. But justice is not tidy. Veronica tried to burn the bridge and the papers. She was almost romantic about it. Dragging papers into boxes. Shoving them into a shredder like a woman in a novel who believes she can unwrite what's been done. The county agents moved faster. They had warrants. They sequestered files. Took statements. The town's whispers found a louder voice. News cameras came. And then more neighbors. And then emails from people who had left the neighborhood years ago with complaints and receipts, and more names. Cole pleaded for his mother in interviews. His voice thin. "We were scared," he said. And I realized he meant many things. Scared of a father's judgment. Scared of losing his place of certain comfort. Scared of being the one responsible for what happens when a carefully stacked life collapses. I felt a complicated thing, not sympathy for how he pointed a gun. Never that, but an understanding of how power breeds a kind of fear that makes mistakes more dangerous than they need be. The final public meeting was as clamorous as a town hall can be. Veronica was escorted out. Cole's father faced charges. Several board members resigned. And in their place, people who'd been sidelined for years: Sandra Kim, Rita Alvarez. Others who'd been whispered about as difficult took seats at the table. They proposed new bylaws, transparency measures, audits at regular intervals, community oversight, a promise to make decisions in daylight instead of authoritarian corners. And yet, as the dust settled and the pool reopened and Maya drew again on the coping with a new sketchbook, I felt the strange, quiet truth: you can change bylaws. You can replace a board. You can indict a man. But you can't rewrite what people believe overnight. There are attitudes like moss, they grow quietly, then take root. We had a celebratory block barbecue the first Saturday after the board was replaced. People came with potato salads and stories and a tentative kind of hope. Maya laughed, real and bright, and I felt something unclench in my chest. But that night, as I lay awake, listening to the faint hum of lawnmowers and a dog barking 3 houses down, my mind kept returning to smaller things. The way Veronica used the word community to hide control. The way Cole's anger had been fashioned into a weapon by privilege. The neighbors who had been afraid to speak until someone else spoke first. There was one conversation I had that I still think about with Rita, who'd lived in Emerson Park since the first brick was laid. She told me, when the TV crews left and the subpoenas were put away, a lot of what hurts isn't money. It's that we forgot how to be neighbors. We forgot to ask each other how we were. We let a board decide what kindness looked like. And that was easier than talking. She was right. The whole thing, at its core, wasn't just about a gun or a ledger. It was about people abdicated to systems and then surprised when those systems served themselves. Sometimes people ask me if I regret posting the video. They like simple answers. They want the clean narrative a hero posts. Bad guys are exposed. Everyone claps. Life doesn't do that. The video changed things. It made evidence plain. But it also made us vulnerable. It stripped away illusions. For some, that was necessary. For others, it felt like chaos. I regret the fear it caused Maya for a while, the way kids at school pointed or said things she had to explain, but I don't regret the truth. There are nights I think about the legal work that followed. About depositions and the grind of paperwork. It's easy to romanticize the dramatic, the courtroom reveal. The public shame, but most of the work was tedious. Line items. Matching dates. Cold emails. Phone calls where people said, "I'll get back to you." It's humbling to watch real justice require patience. You learn to take victories in small measures. A subpoena served to the right person. A ledger entry that matches a bank deposit. Neighbors who start asking more questions at meetings. We still have disagreements in Emerson Park. Not everyone agrees that the old board was corrupt. There are families who grieve the public scrutiny, who say the neighborhood lost a sense of privacy. There are people who argue that the county overstepped, that small communities should manage their own conflicts. Those arguments are valid in their own way. My point isn't that I was right and everyone else wrong. It's that the balance between privacy and accountability is a constant negotiation. And sometimes it takes a blow-up to teach people what transparency looks like. As for Maya, she's back to drawing. Bigger now. Adding shadows and angles she didn't before. She asks harder questions about who gets to fly under the radar. Who gets to decide what's a rule and what's a way to hold others down. She's more cautious, but also more curious. Why didn't anyone stop them sooner? She asked me once. And I told her the truth. People stop themselves. Usually. They say it's not my business until it is. If you take anything from this, let it be small and practical. Watch what your neighbors do. Not just what they say. Ask questions when something feels off. Hold people in power to account, not because power is always bad, but because it's human to let good intentions calcify into control. And if you see injustice, whether in an HOA meeting or at work or in a town square, document it. Paper and recording are not dramatic tools. They're quiet ones that build a case. I don't claim to be a savior. I'm a man who used to think quiet was enough, who learned the hard way that sometimes quiet is a cover for decisions made in corners. There were moments I felt ruthless, wanting to expose everyone who'd stood by. There were moments I wanted to bury it and move to the next town where people pretended nothing happened. The truth was in the middle. The work was to find neighbors who still wanted to live together and to convince them that fairness is worth the trouble. If you're listening from somewhere similar, maybe in a neighborhood with rules that feel more like cages than guidance, don't assume silence equals consent. Start with conversation. Start with small acts of transparency. Push for votes. Not just for appearances, but for record keeping. Ask for receipts. Ask for meetings that are open. That's where a community learns to govern itself without a throne. And one more thing. If you believe someone you love could be pushed aside by a system of rules, don't be afraid to make a sound. The first person to speak changes everything. That's how the Hales were found out. Someone posted a video. Someone opened a folder. Someone spoke at a meeting. It was ordinary people doing ordinary things that made the extraordinary correction possible. So tell me, which side do you see? Do you think the HOA system is beyond repair? Or do you think more eyes and more records can fix it? Have you ever seen rules used to make life difficult for someone? Drop a comment below with your story or your take. If you've been through something like this, say it not because I need validation, but because other people need to hear they're not alone. Share this with someone who lives in a small community, or with a neighbor you trust. If you want updates on how our neighborhood is doing, not promises, just the truth as it comes, subscribe, and I'll share what we learn. And if you think I crossed a line or mishandled things, say that too. The point isn't me. The point is the conversation. Tell me what you think.